That's not true. The reality is that what ends up happening with that fatigue is you have a breakdown in mechanics that are already really sloppy. And when you're playing long passes up to the forward or whatever in soccer, there's a lot of times where now you're running not only with fatigue, not only with bad mechanics, but now you're also putting your body in an overflow situation where the muscles and the firing patterns are moving oddly. Then that's a recipe for disaster. And for me, it's like the better movers that anybody becomes at half speed, full speed, acceleration, maximum velocity, which is all required in the game of soccer, the better off that you're going to build bulletproof athletes. And that track and field and mechanics and learning how to run well at full speed is really important, because a lot of people, you know, will highlight, well, we've gotten really faster in our flying 10 or flying 20. Great. That's great. We want to move the ceiling of absolute speed up. But also, how does it look? You can run really fast a couple of times and absolutely blow the engine out. Like if you look at like dragster racing or, Fast and the Furious movie series, they're always hitting the nitrous, and they're blasting the car down the track and it has this rapid acceleration. Well, I look at that as like if you're improving absolute speed like that, but you're not doing it with the other part of the equation, which is improved mechanics, you're increasing the chance of danger, dangerous situations where, of course, an athlete is going to tear a muscle, pull a hip, have a hamstring strain. And these are things that I think coaches who aren't neck deep in the world of speed like we are don't quite understand the value and importance of teaching those things and having something set aside every day in practice for the athletes to work on and improve that skill of moving fast.
So let's dive into that more on the mechanics front. I have a couple questions with that. So is there such thing as perfect sprint mechanics? Or are there just like some big rock things we should be just really aiming for? And what are those?
Dan Path told me a long time ago that it's very dangerous to seek perfection because perfection is very fragile. It requires everything working absolutely perfectly at all times. Well, in a game like soccer, a game like football, there is not that perfection. So instead of working towards perfection, I always talk about you want a robust athlete, an athlete that can handle less than perfect conditions and still be successful, being able to adapt and move to the situation. So when we look at what would be perfect mechanics, well, definitely one of the biggest things we see is where posture plays a role. Are their hips turned down? Are their hips turned back excessively? Do we see a lot of backside action? So where we see the foot spinning kind of behind the butt instead of in front of the belly button and down. And if you see that in excess, we're not getting, first of all, we're not covering ground. We're spending a lot of time of our rotationary ability behind us. So we're actually cheating ourselves out of feet of distance on every stride that we have. And in addition, the body's not meant to take the ground, deal with the ground, push over the center of mass on the foot in that position, and then propel the body forward. And so when we're doing that, then we're increasing the chance of injury as well, because the body's, elastic properties and all the connective tissue and everything is being asked to do the work out of balance. So what I like to see at full speed is a nice upright body position once we're done accelerating, having good front side mechanics, not excessive backside, and hips that are in what I would call a neutral position where they don't feel like they're folded down or they're pointing up excessively. And why is that? Because the anterior part of the body, the front side of the body, and the posterior side of the body does half the work. So if you're not using one side and the other side's getting excessive work, again, it's a recipe for disaster, but it's also limiting the amorphic properties of that individual athlete to take advantage of themselves. And that's where it gets into that, well, what's perfect? Well, there are some rocks that we need to see. Good front side mechanics, not excessive backside, neutral hips, nice upright position. But in soccer, you can't do that all the time because you're adjusting to movements, you're running laterally, you're running at angles and all that. In addition, in the sport of soccer and in football and sports like that, athletes have a lot of different sizes. So while we want to see those basic tenets of good front side, not excessive backside, and neutral hips, it's always going to look a little different for the athlete who you may have. I mean, you've got somebody who's got excessively long legs, or an athlete that's a little bit more built up and kind of looks endomorphic as opposed to ectomorphic. Well, that's going to change what it's going to look like. It doesn't mean it's wrong, but as a coach, then you got to go, okay, for this particular person, does that seem to fit what they need and how they should look? And as you do this stuff, you'll start to figure that out. Because some people, as you know, coach, is hips are not necessarily constructed the same way. So when we ask certain things, you have to realize, well, like that joint just is never going to be able to do that. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to then still fit a lot of the basic tenets of good front side mechanics, not landing on the back of our heel, getting to the midfoot, having neutral hips as best we can, not having excessive side to side action when we're running straight down the field. These are things that need to be worked on.
It's amazing what just fixing that posture does for sprinting form. And are there any cues you give your athletes to really open up that posture and make sure they're being as upright as they can, whether it's in like mechanics drills or running longer sprints?
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest thing first of all, when we line everybody up on the track, we get on a line, we don't get in a lane, so that when we're doing all these drills, we want to make sure that we're not seeing excessive right to left action, and we put them on a line instead of the lane because aim small, miss small. Then we always talk about hips up, shoulders up, ankles up. And shoulders up, we don't want them up top tight. So we just want that chest up, hips up, ankles up, and to give them in this nice upright body position. Because one of the things we have to deal with as a coach in our modern context is that people are hunched over computers all day long. They're looking at their phone, and if they have a huge head like I have, a head the size of a cannonball, and I'm leaning over looking at my phone, you're rolling over that back for hours and hours a day. And if you think about how much time they spend on screen time, that's also a guaranteed time with bad posture. So we spend a lot of time with chest up, hips up, ankles up, and then we roll into the drill. So you'll literally see all my athletes as they step to the front of the row on the line. You literally see them rise up from their ankles, chest up, hips up, and then we go into that. The other thing is if we see their hips are wonky one way or another, we always talk about sucking in the gut and tucking in the glutes. So we talk about sucking and tucking. And what we always tell our kids is we don't want them to have a duck butt. And what that looks like is the athlete is running in a chair. They're running upright, but they seem to still not be upright. They seem to be running as if they had a chair underneath them and they're spinning on a rolling chair as they move down the track. So we want to be chest up, hips up, ankles up, suck and tuck, and then we don't want that excessive crossover. And that helps me too if I have them on a line, because that line becomes a landmark for me to see how much they're twisting through that. The other thing that we do to help posture is, well, and first of all, let me back up for you too. We always do our technical running stuff at the beginning of practice because that central nervous system needs to be the freshest to learn. So when we do our drills and we do our warm up, for me as a track and field coach, that's where I do my most coaching and I'm being very critical about the details, because if I don't see those things, they're going to get hardwired incorrectly. And whatever you do as an athlete, and if you're trying to make a biomotor pattern, a firing pattern change, it's going to take 500 hours, give or take, to fix that process. Well, that's a lot of work. And so, whatever you're doing, you want to make sure that you're getting the best bang for your buck. So, from that central nervous system, we want that on the front end of practice where the athlete is the freshest so we can make those minor corrections. Okay. The other stuff that we do to fix posture issues and things like that is we'll take away their arms. So Franz Bosch, a European coach, has done a lot of work with this where he'll put his athletes' hands out in front of them, straight above them, on the temples. Tony does like the pistol position, and we do a bunch of different hand positions. And what that does is, again, it shifts the weight of the athlete, changes the center of mass just slightly enough that now the athlete has to, again, relearn how to run, move, jump in these positions without the help of the hands or the arms. And I found that that really helps fix some of that excessive over rotation. Because if you look at the body, the upper body and the lower body are counter rotating themselves as you're sprinting down the track to keep you straight, to keep you moving in the direction you want to go as efficiently as possible. But people learn bad habits, and the arms are kind of like the training wheels, if you will, to the body if you were on a bicycle as a little kid. You take those training wheels away, you really find out some things about your athletes. Some athletes have excessively weak lumbar strength or lower core. They really needed those arms to keep themselves in balance. And so that little minor tweak to a drill forces the athlete to really learn how to move in absence of that assistance from the arms. The other thing we'll do if I'm dealing with a field sport athlete, and we do this in track practice too, is that I'll force these drills on turns. So if you've got a big center field circle or a lacrosse circle or something on your field that has a nice followable arc, we will force our athletes to then still do these drills and the mechanics work while we're on a curve, on a swivel, on a turn line. And we try to implement that stimulus at different points in the season. Let's say every 3 to 6 weeks we'll change it up where we throw this stuff in to force the athlete to constantly adjust and never get docile and plateau neurologically. And that forces the athlete to continue to learn. It also keeps practice interesting. And it also keeps the athlete in a state where they're having to have what I would call positive attention, not paralysis by analysis,